If I can have roll call, please.
Alternate member John Chamberlain. Alternate member Stephen Marie Martino. Member Joanne Roberts. Member Steve Cooley.
Here.
Member Richard Beneke. Member John Hallowell.
Here.
Vice Chair Ray Santos.
Here.
Chair Elaine Morgan.
Here.
Treasurer Sharon Geiser.
Here.
Council member Laura.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Carroll.
Here. Okay, if we could have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, do we have any adjustments to the agenda for this evening? None? Okay. Any conflict of interest disclosures? Good on that? Okay. Okay, we'll open public comment. Let me just read our disclosure here. Any one person may address the committee on any matter not on this agenda. If you wish to speak, please fill out a public comment form provided at the back table and give it to the committee chair or secretary. There is a 3-minute limit on public comments. There will be no sharing or passing of time to another person. State law prohibits the committee from discussing or taking actions brought up by your comments. And do we have public speakers?
Yes. Judy Bingham.
Okay.
Judy Bingham, 115 Minnesota. Beaumont Citizens for Responsible Growth filed a complaint against the City of Beaumont's bond fraud scam in March 2015. The first phony finance committee was formed by Alan Kapanicus in June 2015. And so it would appear they were in compliance with SEC laws. That committee consisted of Brenda Knight, David Castaldo, and Bill Alward. That might explain it. This is the second phony finance committee formed since the SEC started investigating Beaumont's bond and construction scam. And all of you better figure out quick that you are civilly and criminally responsible for your participation in any fraud committed by this committee. On August the 23rd, 2017, the SEC released 3 orders regarding Beaumont's $300 million bond and construction scam. The bond underwriters have been fined and censored. Former city manager Alan Kapanicus has been forever banned from the bond industry. The Beaumont Finance Authority's order to cease and desist from committing or causing any violations and any future violations of Section 17A2 and 17A3. Section 17A2 makes it unlawful in the offer of sale of any securities, directly or indirectly, to obtain money or property by means of any untrue statements of a material fact or any omission to state a material fact necessary in order to make the statements made in light of the circumstances under which they were made not misleading. Section 17A3 makes it unlawful to engage in any transaction, practice, or course of business which operates or would operate as a fraud or deceit upon the purchaser. The SEC order summary specifically named the continuing disclosure agreements and the annual reports containing financial information and operating data related to the bonds being offered. Whether the city wants to admit it or not, The SEC order of cease and desist will remain in effect until the city is in compliance with SEC laws, and no, municipal agencies are not exempt from SEC regulations. The city is required to hire a consultant that has not been affiliated with the city for the last 2 years because the SEC knows that the city just brought in another set of crooks. Within 180 days, the city must comply with all existing continuing disclosure undertakings, including updating past delinquent filings. This means the city has to file financial statements and infrastructure certificates of completion that are not fraudulent. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any other speakers? Okay.
Ron Roy?
Good afternoon. Hope you're having a good fall. I'd like to bring up improvement area 19A. I'm a resident property owner there. We're trying to achieve a accelerated pay down by 2025 on that. Our existing bond debt is about 19 million, I guess. Let me jump in real quick. Over the last few years, the city has tried to improve compliance and transparency in its finances and financial reporting. For example, the city now has various funds to track revenues and expenses, such as general fund, enterprise funds, and other funds, including the CFD fund, which is my concern tonight. The city must now recognize the Beaumont Finance Authority agency with a primary responsibility over Melrose bonds as a component unit, and its agency funds will now be reporting Melrose bond funds separately. Under the BFA, I gather 71 improvement areas that are out there, and I guess there's around 25 that are active with bond debt. So I live in 19A, and so my request is that the BFA needs to start reporting each improvement area's bonds activity separately. I'm asking the finance committee and department when we can start seeing these reports. At last city council meeting, I spoke with Richard Wall, who's the finance manager for Albert Webb. He represents the city. And he told me about a nutshell of the payment process, which I found in some documents in the city council as well. So he indicates, here's how it works, okay? So we have about 19 million, right? We have about 543 property owners. I'm thinking we're averaging around 3,500 to 4,000 after you've done your method and rate of apportionment. So I'm thinking we're pulling in about $2 million that we pay each year to pay down on our bond debt. Okay, that's my guess. Okay, so the way it works according to Richard, there's 2 coupon dates, okay? There's March 1st and there's September 1st, okay? And so however that's done, nobody really knows that money is paid in those 2 coupon dates. And I guess that's all the bonds are set up that way. So, okay, so the process, first of all, the money is collected by the county tax collector, okay? Then they send that money to the city of Beaumont, okay? Then Beaumont sends it to Wilmington Trust. I guess it's a new trustee, which has been in existence since March. And then the trustee sends the proceeds to the bondholders, these magical people who are, you know, making investment interest income in the market, in the bond market. Okay, so my question is, in what form does the city receive confirmation of the actual amount that was applied to the bond debt? I mean, how do we know, you know, when the 2 million is paid, is that $1 million in March and $1 million in September? And how do we get that information and confirmation for my residents, all 543 property owners? Times 4, you know, you're looking at 5,000 to 6,000 people, right, with families and stuff. Okay, So there's also, okay, and now this ties into the fees. I would like to ask that we get a report and at least annually that shows the principal outstanding of our bond debt. I think that would be a really good thing. I think at minimum, I know the coupon dates are twice a year, but I would think perhaps around, once a year. And I would also like to ask if you could look into setting up an escrow process where we can set up escrow accounts. Now, this is just very general, and I don't expect anything detailed right now, but just to consider the idea of an escrow account where property owners can put money in, and then that money in escrow, maybe through a local bank or through the city, can be coordinated with an annual payment. My goal is to avoid these outrageous fees that were just approved so that Alfred Webb gets $500 every time an individual property owner has to make a greater than normal payment. I just think it's really onerous. I think we can skin the cat without those fees. I would be okay with it was a final payoff where the $500 fee is like, okay, I'm going to put this on the record. It gets complicated right from here. But let's say I owe $50,000 on my individual. I could understand if I'm paying the entire amount off, I'd pay the $500. But if it's going to be in installments, it's a $500 each time. So I've confused you enough, and I just wanted to kind of put that out there, and please consider what I've been bringing up. And thank you so much for giving me the time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any other speakers? Okay, we'll close public comment at 6:15.
We should make note that we have 2 additional committee members who came after the roll.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all.
I apologize.
That's okay. You got that right, Donna? All right, thank you.
The
Thanks,
added.
guys.
Okay. All right. The next item is number 2, adoption of minutes. I do have a correction on the minutes. We did have Judy Bingham as a public speaker during our public comment period at our last meeting, and that's not noted, so I'd like to be sure that we add her and, the bullet points on her discussion. I think if we follow along with council's format for their minutes, I think we'd be just great if we did that. Was there any other corrections that anybody noted? Yeah.
I move that we accept the minutes with the noted change.
I'll
Yeah.
second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to number 3, committee compliance with SEC regulations. And Milana, I think you're doing the staff report on that?
Yep.
Thank you.
I am. At the last meeting, it was brought up that there were some rules that applied to this committee. And so I wanted to bring to everyone's attention that what was spoken about relates to the Act, the Act of 1934 and the Act of 1933. And those rules within those 2 acts don't apply to municipalities. They set up a completely different arm within the SEC to regulate. So those rules for the committee are specifically for publicly held companies and not for municipalities. And I gave you all the different web pages and stuff to know where it is you need to go if you were concerned about what it is we have to do.
Excuse me. Heather, can you hear her okay on the microphone?
Hello. Is that better?
Okay.
Okay.
I apologize, but could you repeat that to make sure that it's recorded?
Sure.
I thank you,
trying to-
Milana, for your patience.
Like a little note.
There you go.
Okay. The Securities Act of 1933 and the Securities Act of 1934 specifically address finance committees' requirements, what they have to do, how they have to do it, what they have to be comprised of, and all of the rules regarding that. Those particular rules do not apply to municipalities. Municipalities have a different arm within the SEC that they're governed by, and that is what I have provided to you, the Office of Municipal Securities. They have a different flow of how they make sure that the municipal government that's in the bond market is maintained, how it's structured and how it's organized. So the rules are a little different. They don't actually have any specific rules that they have for the committee itself, but they do have oversight in general where they try to make sure that the disclosure statements which go with the bond issues themselves are complete and accurate, and other types of things that they look at. So I just wanted the committee to know that those original bullet points that were discussed, those don't actually apply to this body.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about the documents that were given to us? Okay, I think it's also really important for us to make a very strong point that this committee and the purpose for this committee is much different than being a financial audit, like an accounting audit committee. That's not what we're here to do. We're a process audit committee, more so than anything else. We're not accountants. When we don't do, itemized accounting, forensic accounting, whatever you want to call it, that's not what this committee is here to do. So I wanted to, I went back and just kind of did some background on when our committee was structured. And on June 6th of 2016, starting at 2 hours and 4 minutes into the video, is when we started our discussion on the purpose and the creation of this committee. And we had quite a long discussion about what our job functions were and what we were here to do. And I think it's, and we also in that meeting had a discussion on adding audit to the committee's name. Instead of it just being the finance committee, we changed it to finance and audit. And it was very specifically brought up and discussed in there that we were, our goal was to audit the processes so that we made sure that the city was in compliance with the state audit that they did.
Right.
And that was the depth of our auditing that we were doing. So we never changed any of the original setup from the original ordinance. We haven't added anything to that. The purpose was never changed when we changed our name. It's always been the same as when it was originally developed. So that's my 2 cents. Any other comments? We have a public comment, okay. I'll open for public comment at 6:23.
In the second paragraph of Judy Bingham, 115 Minnesota. In the second paragraph of the staff report, Milana Taylor claims the 1933 and 1934 SEC laws were enacted with broad exemptions for municipal securities from all provisions except specifically identified anti-fraud provisions within each act. That is a fraudulent statement. The SEC laws apply to everyone that acquires bond debt, including cities. The SEC issued the cease and desist order against the Beaumont Financing Authority by using their powers under Section 8A of the 1933 Securities Act. Taylor also claims that the 2002 Sarbanes-Oxley Act doesn't apply to municipalities, but those laws are the reason this Finance and Audit Committee was created in the first place. Taylor also claims that Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform requiring all of the city's bonds be disclosed on Emma does not apply to the city, but that's a lie. All of Beaumont's bonds and every other municipal bond issued in the United States must follow MSRB reporting and disclosure laws. On March the 25th, city staff and the auditing firm of Van Lant Pankhanel altered the 2015 financial statements after they were approved by this committee for the purpose of defrauding financial institutions. This committee was notified and ignored the crime. This committee is responsible for hiring an independent auditing firm to audit the city's financial statements. The auditing firm of Van Lant Pankhanel was handpicked by former Finance Director Bill Alward and Council Member Nancy Carroll. The auditing firm doesn't even have an office. Their business address is a private residence with no home office. The transcript of this committee's meeting will be sent to the SEC, the FBI, the Federal Comptroller of Currency, and state and federal attorney general's office. It is this committee's duty to fire the auditing firm of Van Lant Pankhanel and recommend to council that Milana Taylor is terminated for fraud and incompetence.
Thank you for your comments. And I will reiterate the purpose of this committee in the way that it was designed and set up. Our powers and our duties consist of A, city investment policy and practices, B, long-term financial planning, and C, such other matters as City Council may request from time to time. I just want to make sure that that is specifically understood. If there is a misconception about what this committee is designed to be done or what our duties are, that's something that needs to be taken up with City Council. If they'd like to add to our duties, we're certainly open to having suggestions on what else we can do for the city and the council. Any other comments?
I have some questions.
Okay.
Milana, could I ask you a couple of questions? Thank you. I'm no CPA, but you are. And it's my understanding that Sarbanes-Oxley was set up to control proper auditing procedures and proper reporting procedures for companies, agencies, et cetera, but did not, Sarbanes-Oxley did not directly apply to municipalities. Is that your understanding also?
Yes, it was an internal control document that it was based on investigations that had been done for public companies, not for municipalities.
And Sarbanes-Oxley was a wonderful thing. I mean, it went forth and it systematized reporting and standards and clarified where things really, truly need to be clarified. And, you know, I was really pleased to see it pass.
It completely changed the way that audits are performed and the different things that are done on the audit side as well.
Thank you. And I want to make sure that we have a really good process for when we do interview auditors in response to RFPs, et cetera. Is there anything on our criteria that we go through when we measure the brain power and the authenticity and the appropriateness of any auditing firm? Is there a section in that evaluation where they have to have a fancy office?
No.
Okay. I think that's probably a good idea because we really care about their professional credentials, not how big I think the reception area is. So please keep doing that. Okay. I appreciate that.
With an auditing firm, one of the it's not a plus, but one of the things that makes auditing unusual is that generally you're not in the office. You are at your clients' respective businesses, and all of your staff members are connected through the computer programs. So in many instances, there doesn't even need to be an office if that's the only type of work that's being performed. If you're doing tax work, you would want to have an office to meet with your clients. But in an audit, they don't meet you at your office. You go to their location where they perform their business.
And you go to many, you're involved in the professional circle of certified professional auditors, certified public auditors. Would you ever be embarrassed or not want to say to your peers that you hired a firm that didn't have a big office? Would that be something that you'd be like hoping didn't come up in conversation because it was really critical to all the other CPAs in the universe?
No.
All right.
Could I just ask one question to
Sure.
clarify too? Is there any requirement by the AICPA or the state regulators that any CPA or CPA firm have a physical office of any particular size?
No, they just have to have a street address where the documentation and such can be mailed to them. It cannot be a P.O. box. And so as long as it's an address.
I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Milana. Okay, item number 4, Finance Department policy. And is that you again, Milana?
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, what I thought I would do, because I want to get all of our policies and procedures through committee this year, so I thought I would start with the first section, which is like a general overview of what's expected of the finance department. So it's not anything real specific, it's just an overview. The fact that we follow GAAP and GASB, the fact that we have fund accounting, the different funds that we use, how we measure, how our chart of accounts is set up, how we have reports, what our internal controls are, our personnel and the rotations, the monthly reports, journal entries, and annual statements. So it's just like a broad brush. Here's all of what it is we expect. This is what's going to govern the department itself. And then we'll start looking at some of the pieces then that fall underneath that broad umbrella. So I brought that to the committee to see if you had any comments, if you had any suggestions for changes, or if there's anything that you believe maybe I missed that I need to make sure is addressed in this overview piece.
Okay, so this was designed as an overview of the department, and then from there, you go into actually doing the manual on the processes.
Right.
And the procedures on how to handle those processes.
Right.
So this is the beginning.
This is the beginning. This is
Okay.
the first step. So this then will govern how we structure the rest of the policies and procedures that will fall underneath this scope.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion or a request?
Sure.
And that's on page 2 of the draft manual, which would be page 24 of the printout. Under timeliness, could we consider the city strives and replace that, or consider replacing that with the city does? I think that the history and the background, that we don't want to put anything out there that could be construed being that we're leaving an out in case we make an error.
Okay.
I think we just want to be positive that we're going to do it, has to be done.
Absolutely. Okay.
So you're suggesting the removal of the word strives?
Yeah.
And
just
replacing
the
that with,
city-
this
the
is what we do.
City maintains,
financial
right.
records.
Okay.
Okay. Can do that.
I don't think it's an issue, I just don't want someone to be able to use it.
Right. And that is our plan going forward anyway. So we should be able to get that and have a positive affirmation of that.
Okay. Questions? Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am. In relation to that same section, their timeliness, I noticed that there's not any particular fiscal benchmark as far as timeliness is when you're cutting off for department expenses. Are we just allowing them to spend all the way through June 30 and accrue? Or do we typically set something up like mid-May, we expect all accounts receivable,
Right.
so on and so forth. I mean, I'm not trying to go
Right.
way in depth, but just some of those big benchmarks possibly to,
Accounts receivable is always on an accrual basis.
Okay.
So that one is consistent. The one is our payables.
okay,
Because as any company does, you get the invoices for the month.
sure.
Later in the next month, usually a good 30 days sometimes. So what we've been doing is doing it based on the check dates and keeping the expenses more on a cash basis until we get to June. And then we do a full accrual of the payables for June 30 each year. We can look at changing that. It just slows down the process of being able to issue a financial report while we wait for accruals to show up.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was gonna offer you an opportunity there, if you set the June 1st cutoff for the end of the fiscal, perhaps for purchases, for department expenses, et cetera.
We
That's
try
not-
to, but
Yeah.
it really depends on what projects are ongoing.
Understood.
So, but we do try to do that.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
sure.
This might be related, but just, I would see the initial closing of June 30th account as being September 30.
Yes.
You don't truly intend to drag it out 90 days, do you?
We have
There'll
to
be a
leave
point
it-
ends here to whatever extent possible. You're not going to make a purchase on July 15th.
Oh, no.
For the prior year.
The reason it's held open is under governmental standards, your revenues have to be recorded based on what did you get 60 days after year end. It's not like a regular for-profit business. So what we do is we leave the full 60 days, not for expenses unless we're accruing, picking up things that went in the payables, but we're leaving it open to see if we have revenues that come in so we can get them recorded properly in the receivables side from other governments. So we take that last 30 days in order to get all of our accruals in line and get them all posted, which is what we're working on right now, is to get all the accruals at June 30 collected and get them posted so that then we have a good, solid starting point, but it won't probably be till the end of this month.
Correct. And hopefully, in the detail, that will be explained that there won't be ongoing transactions that are
Right.
commenced after June 30th,
No.
but only compiled.
Right, not to be backdated. It doesn't work that way. If we get invoices, like at the last council meeting, I finally had gotten the fourth quarter, the June quarter end invoice for the fire contract. So that's going to be moved back at June, but only because I just got it, not because it's something that we contracted after that. So,
Correct. It's something that
Right.
did occur prior to that.
Right.
That closing date. And I'd just like to see that spelled out in
The
the detail.
accruals itself, okay.
Without an accounting background, I could see that someone could
Right.
see that this draft allows the departments to continue spending after the,
Right. So I can add
year end.
some verbiage after the monthly reports that talks about the cutoffs.
please.
Okay.
I think this is a good start for your overall, the overall picture. What is your plan and timeline from here, Milano, on where do you think you're going to be able to actually have policies and procedures in place?
I want to have we're following them, so now I'm documenting them. So my plan is to have the entire document completed before the end of December.
Okay.
We'll go through every piece of it and revisit it, and then we'll have something we can look at either only at year end, if you want to look at it twice a year, make sure that things don't need to be updated as we go along, if there's a change in the standards or in structure of something the city's doing, just something that then we can manage easier, but I need to get it all down and in writing first.
So do you think by year end,
Yes.
we would have an actual policy
thing.
procedures in place? Okay.
We're just going to do one at a time.
Yeah. Okay.
Madam Chairman,
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hollowell. Go ahead.
I'm looking at page 4, or if you want to refer to it as 26, underneath protection of assets.
Yes.
Starts out talking about all cash is carefully stored in a locked drawer or safe. with limited access.
Yes.
Then it goes on and starts talking about all files with sensitive information are kept locked. It seems like we are switching horses in the middle of the string.
They're both with limited access. I should maybe we make it clear as to who it is who has access to those different pieces. It depends on the role of the person, and we have safeguards in place for that. But I can make it more clear here, or we can put it in the procedures for the different pieces. Like we're going to have one for cash itself, because we have safes, we have cash drawers, we have the armored truck, we have all of those things. So I could make it more clear there. And then when we get to payroll and personnel management, I would have additional safeguards that we would discuss there. And when we get to legal, I would have an even different policy for documentation that stays locked and safeguarded. And
Okay.
so you think here, or be more specific in the different areas?
Well, I think of cash and I think of files as two different subjects.
Well, I
And they
think-
are. They really are.
I think it's, the title of that section, though, is protection of assets. And assets being more than just cash. There's
Right.
sensitive information that's also protected under assets. Do you think maybe the title might be
That might
something
be.
to work on?
I'll see if I can come up with something
Yeah.
besides assets, protection of data, or protection of, I'll come up with something.
Something.
Security.
But then as I continue to read that statement, it says City Hall doors are locked at the end of service hours. Which doors are the City Hall doors?
All of them. Well, you're right. The glass doors that lead into the offices are locked at the time that our regular opening hours are closed. The building itself may be unlocked if there's an event being held, like in the gym or something like that. So the building itself could be unlocked for longer, but then by the time all events are done and people leave, the entire building then is secured.
Because what I'm thinking is that you have internal doors within
We do.
that glassed off area.
We do.
Maybe that could be
Address too.
addressed a little bit better. Because someone could read this and say to the city manager, why isn't the outside door locked when you're not open for business? The regular hours of business.
Right.
Maybe City Hall office doors? Just something that would clarify it more?
Right.
Then-
I'll rework it so that we have something to review next time, along with the next section. Okay.
One last thing. Okay, under vacations, I know this is not a GASB requirement, it's not a state requirement, but the FDIC, FINCA, the banking regulations have been very successful by forcing employees who handle cash to take their vacation in units of more than a day. I just like to kick out, you might want to discuss with the city's HR, with the city council, if that's something that could be considered. It makes it much more difficult for somebody who's manipulating the system that they're forced to take vacation in a period of 3 to 5 days at a time.
Right.
Not a requirement, but it's a really good.
We can have it as a suggestion. And since I've been here, I'm trying to think of all of the finance staff, and no, everyone has taken a full vacation because we've had to make sure we had back training on all the different functions at different times. But that can definitely be something we put in the suggestions, and I can talk to HR about that language. We just have to be careful under which MOU they fall under.
Right,
But
because we
I-
have varying MOUs, don't we?
Right.
Okay, so,
That's a good point, though. When
Mr. Laura.
I kind of had that you were going to go down a different road on the vacations. I think the city may have a separate policy on how vacations are handled. And so I was going to suggest, since you cover it very well in the paragraph above, that you don't need to mention anything in regards to vacations.
I see. Yeah.
And then just maybe identifying or tracking the employees who have had cross-train. I think that's a great idea, whether it's in their personnel file or wherever, but just in case it's questioned later, you have something to fall back on. The other thing I was going to suggest was that as you move forward, that in your introduction here, that you make space or plan to reference your policy numbers.
Yes, we'll have like an index and.
Exactly, and
Exactly.
that, so each section would refer to a policy form that, you can turn to and track that way. But I think you got a very good start, and I'm glad to see it. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Any other questions?
Just a comment.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
On your timeline in there, I really congratulate you on putting all those deadlines and everything in there. The only point I have in there, I haven't seen it. I mean, this is my first time to see it, reviewing it and glance it. Is your all your prepayments and everything. And I know you do accrual on that, but I look on the policy. It doesn't say in there that how many. Usually, we are on the 12 months or to spread that prepayments and everything in there.
Right.
And then on connections on that, it doesn't say also what's our how we do capitalize all the assets we have.
The capital
And is there
policy.
any limit in there? Is it 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 that we will capitalize all those assets in there? I just glanced it and then I said, oh, okay, that's the only thing I would like to point out. But the rest, congratulations, this is good, man. I mean, you cover all the accounts receivables and disbursement and everything.
And when
Thank you.
when I talk about the timelines of when we're going to issue, I can put in when things are accrued and how accrued. And then I can also talk about the capitalization threshold. I totally spaced on that. We have a policy for that we've already done. It just,
Yeah.
I just guess I forgot because we'd already done it. But I will add that here too.
Okay, thank you. Can I jump really forward on this in the future? And I congratulate all the staff in here that, everybody's working on this thing. When we started in 2015, we're blank, we're zero. This is great, the way I see it. I mean, based on my experience and everything, this is great. Now, on my experience on this, probably 2016 and 17, and then we're going on I'm talking about the fiscal year now, on the 2017-18. Can we do now a forecasting on the city for 3 years or 5 years? Maybe the city manager will be, I'll be pushing him on that, doing the forecast. So us in here, we will feel good, or we could see what's our future.
We are working on that. We have a
you.
consultant that's been helping us with that process, and we'll be looking at, I think, a draft from him shortly on some changes that we talked to him about. And then, yes, we should be able to look forward 3 and 5 years. And
Yeah.
the city council just approved the 5-year CIP. So now we've got the CIP, and I'm getting that set up so that we can do some constructive monitoring of those as well. And I'm hoping to start bringing those to this committee as well, so you can see the projects and where we stand on each one of them.
That's good. We're in the bottom right now. So that would be a nice to see. Thank you.
Sure.
We're going to try to wrap up every detail of the state controller's audit checklist by the end of this year, correct? So this all rolls together with wrapping that up. And if I recall, in the state controller's checklist, there was one item that said we needed to have some sort of fraud awareness program that went out in a push kind of a way to the employees that said, do this or feel free to report or whatever.
Right.
We haven't done anything specific with that yet that I know of. I think you talked about doing something, and I'm not sure where that's been updated to, but I think having something in writing that says once a year I'm not telling you how to do it. You guys figure it out. But once a year, we're going to email to all employees that they're free to, we encourage any reporting of any concerns that they may have, however you want to do that. But I know that for compliance with the state controller's office, they want to see something there.
Right.
And I think that it's a good thing that we do anyways. And we've just been trying to figure out how to do it where it's not too burdensome, since we're trying to get on our feet here with every one of the policies and procedures.
Right.
So we don't want to make it too big, but I still think we need to put something in so that we can make sure that we can say we listen to the state controller's office, truly, and also that we can check that off, that we have actually done something about it. So if you've done something that we haven't talked about in this committee, but I know that it did come up before when we were talking about the checklist.
We had a policy as far as responsibilities of the individuals and making sure that management goes through training, and we've done those things. But the only thing I think with staff, I have a policy of our department, which I've told them what they, if they see something, say something. If you don't want to tell me, that's fine, I don't care. Tell somebody above me, same level, somebody, bring your concerns up. I know there's a lot of different programs out there for this fraud process. One of the most expensive ones is having an 800 number that goes to like a legal service. So I'd like to not have to go that route, but we need to find something that's effective that we can put in place here at City Hall. So,
Do you think that would be an overall policy for all personnel?
it should be all personnel.
And then identifying it again in your policy and procedures for the finance?
It's definitely in the finance committee. I mean, it's in the finance committee. It's in the finance department, but I will make sure that it's like bold or something. But yes, there should be something that any member of the staff of any department, if they think they see something wrong, they should not feel like they can't say anything or they'll get in trouble.
Right.
So that is really huge, because sometimes it's that one little thing that starts that ball rolling, and then you can find things that have been going wrong or things that we should address differently. So no, it should be everybody.
I just think elevating something into this
I can do that.
Yeah.
The fraud
connects
policy.
to that would be good.
And then maybe identify it
Right,
more in
citywide.
depth,
And I
further in the, yeah,
I
but
can talk to HR and see
Yeah.
if there's something that they have that they have access to, or they can go back to someone that they know and get some ideas, and we can make that happen.
okay.
And then this may be outside of the scope of this, so I won't be offended if you tell me that it is. But I want to say, every year we look at whether we should go out to RFP for auditors, and then we evaluate what the response is, and then we make a sort of coalesce down to a few, and then that comes to the audit committee, and then the recommendations of the audit committee goes to the council for the final. So should there be any wording at all, and just think about it, it may be out of the scope, but we get often, people get the wrong impression as if we are shortchanging that process or not doing it in every judicial step that we should be doing. And so I don't know if there's any, since you do the annual financial statements, is there anything in terms of policy that should be added that takes that concept and puts it down or not?
I don't know if it would belong here, because the auditor shouldn't be treated differently than any other consultant of the city, and we have a municipal code that dictates what we do
That's
when
true.
we go to RFP. So I could maybe say something about any consultant that will be working within the finance department will be held to the same standard as any other consultant in accordance with the municipal code.
And then maybe cite the code.
Right.
I'm not pushing for it to be mentioned. I just want to, I know that we chose VLF by going out to RFP.
Right.
And then having a response to an RFP. and then an audit committee, which at the time there were 5 members of it. You were on it too, Mike,
Yeah.
right? How
Yeah, I
many
think there
members did we
was-
have?
It was just 5.
5 members. There were 5 members of the audit committee, and then it was the early beginnings of this committee. And then that committee made recommendations, which we didn't have very many responses.
Right.
We only had 1.
Right.
But we were fortunate that they were very qualified. So that committee then made the they interviewed and we had the auditors come to the audit committee and we interviewed them. And then that recommendation from the entire committee, all of us, went to council, and then council made their decision. So it's nice that we keep that clarified, proper process, and it's not a recommendation of anything other than a cohesive, voted on recommendation by the audit committee, which is how we chose VLF.
Right.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I was thinking somewhere along the process that in our discussions over the years, we've discussed how we were going to appoint the auditors. But for consistency and methodology, we weren't necessarily going to replace them every year.
That's what my understanding was too.
Not always, no. I didn't, I just, my thought was, and I, again, am not offended if you don't include it, was just to say what the general process was. If it goes to RFP, then this is done, and this is done, and this is done. But if that's, and that is a good point, it is covered by our ordinance, so.
Right. But like I say, I can just reference that
Reference
because
it.
it wouldn't just be the auditor. It would be for any consultant.
That's right.
That
Right.
works with the finance office. So it could be legal, it could be, if we're doing bond refundings, I may have additional consultants that have to work on those documents, any of that. So it should be noted that they all follow the same process citywide, so that it doesn't look as though that the
You have
finance
your own
has any.
world. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm okay with you doing that.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Milana. Oh, I'm sorry. Public speakers on this item? Okay.
Can I ask a favor?
Sure.
Does anyone know why this light is?
A little timer, Billy? I don't know.
I noticed you were flashing, but that wasn't, so
I apologize.
it's okay.
And
Yes, I think it does.
I guess Ron brought up about the reporting of the CFDs. That was the prior, that was his public comment. We're doing it, but
Yeah.
Turn it on.
Yeah.
Oh, look at it works.
All right.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
There we go.
multi-talented.
Okay, public speakers.
Thank you.
First is Judy Bingham.
Judy Bingham, 115 Minnesota. There are 3 separate branches of city governments established to ensure proper checks and balances: the Office of City Clerk, the City Manager's Department, and the Finance Department. In 2012, the City of Beaumont removed the Finance Department from the budget. The Finance Department is a separate independent branch of city government and should not be under City Manager. The Finance Department for a city the size of Beaumont needs a competent and experienced finance director, at least 3 more accountants, and 6 to 8 accounting technicians. There are no separation of duties in Beaumont's Finance Department because there is no staff. Page 3 lists Beaumont's goals for timeliness. It should not take 3 months to close the year-end books. It should take 3 weeks. Milana Taylor still refuses to release the June 2016 general ledger, which is now 14 months overdue.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Yes. Ron Roy.
Yes, I can tell that the committee's really trying to dig in and try and, improve the quality of reporting. And I can tell just by skimming through a lot of the detailed, like monthly reports and whatnot, there's an effort being made. I have to say, I'm very glad the state and the federal government's coming down because it keeps everybody honest. So, that's also kind of 2 cents. May I ask, given that I guess the fiscal year ends June 30th, so thinking of periodicity, I wanted to focus on the reporting of bonds. And again, I don't know if we have any way of tracking the activity of bonds throughout the reporting period. I don't know when they're paid. Are they paid once a year? Are they paid twice a year? I think we would need to know that. If they're being reported, if there's, like, for example, a one payment per year, how are they being booked until that time? Are they going to be considered as a bond payable?
I think,
Yes.
I think we would need to keep this to the actual policies and procedures portion and not detailing.
Okay, do I get my time back?
Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes.
I do think that is a procedure, right? If you wanted to add a entry into, for example, if you look at page 5, I don't see anything that shows for the CFD fund, and I don't see any reporting procedure for that fund. If there's a separate set of statements that come out of that fund as the other funds, I think we have a police fund and so forth, under other funds. I just would like to ask, and it might be available already, if there is a separate set of books or statements that would we can show track the activity of bonds. The bond fund is separate. My understanding as a component unit now, where the finance authority will have to report that activity. So now I'm a broken record. I apologize. I got a chance to drill down this one point. So I appreciate that. So the point would be that is a finance authority, will we be able to go on the Beaumont website, for example, under a certain component unit or a fund, and here's the reporting activity on this item and an annual statement? I do think it would help a lot. It all starts to me like we need to know when they're being paid and how much they're being paid. Is it 1 or 2? And that would affect the entire accounting system. Okay, and thank you so much for that, and good. Keep hanging in there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other public speakers? Okay, we'll close public speaking at 7:02. Item number 4, is there any additional comments from the committee? Questions? Milana, if I could, please.
I want to clarify, first of all, there is no second set of books, right?
Correct. There's one set of books, only one.
I just want to make sure that that's clarified. But also, on this CFD and the reporting.
Yes.
I do know that the reporting now is going to be done through the improved reporting of Wilmington Trust, correct? Should any of that reporting be included in summary on something that says, like, once a year that, we produce reports by the bond trustee or anything like that? Should that be included in here?
One of the things we're working on, and we just got through June posted, all of the investment account statements from Wilmington. We've now got them posted through June, and we need to find a way to get them onto the website. We've been sidetracked on everything else, but we need to get those on the website. And then we're going to work on July and then getting August. The component union is just a structural piece within the city itself. So all the records are still citywide. It's just a citywide document. We do have it broken down, but because that piece I don't have up to date yet, I haven't provided those financial records, but we're going to, as soon as we can get it all tied together. We are tracking everything by specific improvement areas now too. So it's all there. The CFDs come into one fund, and then they split up into other funds. So there's some tracking that we have to do. The bond payments are in a different fund than, say, the maintenance portion of the assessments are in. So it's got a lot more activity because we're breaking it down into a lot more detail. So we're a little behind in getting that straightened out in a way that we'll be able to present those reports. But my goal is that those get released just like any other fund. It's been a little bit of a rocky start, but that is the plan, is that when I say we're going to close in 30 days and give the reports, that I should be able to do every different fund. All of them should be able to be done at the same time.
So recognizing that we're trying to get up to speed, and there's a lot of documentation and research that needs to be done. So are you saying that it would be possible for a individual group or an individual homeowner who's so affected could request through a proper procedure and get those records that have been discussed, where what kind of payments came in on a particular bond and where they were paid? I realize it may not be push a button and get it out.
Right,
But is it something
it's
that
not, but
could be generated
we can generate
with
once.
appropriate time and maybe even?
Right, when we've got everything caught up,
Thank you.
it should be a general ledger reporting process, because like I said, we are breaking everything down by all the individual improvement areas and separating administration from maintenance, from bond debt service, it's all, which makes it huge. But no, the plan is that once we get this all streamlined, we'll be able to do that as well as the general fund regular services of the city at the same time.
And I know we've talked before that your plan is to break that down for each individual area, correct? It's not going to be a lump sum of all of them mixed together. This is going to be identified by each and every area.
Every
Okay.
interest income, 40 different ways. Interest expense, 40 different ways. Bond debt payments, 40 different ways. Everything then goes 40 different ways. So it takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Question about page 4, if I could.
Go.
I have a question on page 4. On page 4, you talked about rotation of duties, separation of duties, responsibility, and you also, on the prior page, page 3, you talked about internal control. Now, we don't have a huge financial staff.
Correct.
We it would be great if we had more. But we don't. And it's my understanding from looking at companies and also looking at government agencies that you don't have a finance department that is independent of any management. What you have when you are large enough is you have an audit department that is allowed to be an independent department that doesn't report up to anything that controls the money.
Right.
Because when you are large enough, you can have an independent audit department that does not report up through any customized or regular channels, so to speak.
They would generally go directly to the Audit and Finance Committee, or they would go directly to the City Council, and that would be considered an internal audit function, yes.
Yes, and that would be its own separate
Yes.
department. And we are not moneyed or big enough at this particular point to be able to have that luxury. So we have a finance department that reports up because that's what you do. When you're not big enough or moneyed enough to have an independent audit department that just floats out there and doesn't report up to everybody.
Right.
In all of the large businesses that I've worked, that has been the rule. And in most of the agencies that I've looked at that are large enough, that is the way that we are structured.
Right.
And we follow that principle?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we try to segregate as much as possible. The person who inputs the invoices into payables cannot sign the checks and does not approve the invoices. Someone else approves them before they get finalized. The checks get printed, they get checked again. Somebody else matches the invoices to the checks once printed. We have the treasurer who comes in and reviews it all again before it gets mailed by an even different person. I mean, we put as many different controls in place as we can. We segregate the responsibilities. So if we switch it up and somebody else does the accounts payable function because someone else is on vacation, then we're going to shift and we're going to find somebody else so that we can fill all of those spots. And we have enough people touching it that there's no inappropriate approvals or anything like that. So.
Okay. I've audited very, very small entities, many hundreds of them. And can you just touch a little bit on compensating controls? I know I've audited some charities that had 3 whole people involved. And of course, they couldn't separate every duty,
right.
But they're compensating controls that allow for that. And I'm sure the city is doing that type of thing rather than going out and hiring a huge staff.
Right. One of the biggest compensating controls we have is in our purchasing. Anything that's greater than $9,999.99 has to be approved by council. We have a purchase order system in place that is sitting there, and nothing can go through the system that's greater than that dollar amount without it being put through, and it's signed off by somebody who is not in the finance department, is not in the city manager's department. It gets approved by our deputy city clerk. So if she doesn't have the minutes that back it up, she won't click the box, which sometimes slows things down. But at least we have that compensating control. And the system will not allow a payment to be processed without that being approved. So there are all kinds of controls within the software we have now that stops that.
So the city is not hampered. It may be slowed down.
Might be slowed
but
down.
The city is not hampered by not having 20 more employees.
Correct. We just get a little backlogged.
Thank you.
And in terms of that review, even at the very last of it, we have a treasurer who is not dependent upon keeping her job. She can't be fired, although she might wish she could. She can't be fired. She's elected.
Right.
And she sits in all the city council meetings, so she knows when things are above a threshold and they go through a proper process. She knows when something isn't. She gets the warrants put before her. She gets time with staff to ask and make sure if there's any question about whether there's, she gets to see the receipts where it's been signed off by proper departments, et cetera, so that it's all in proper process. And then at the very last, she does that final approval on the warrants.
Right.
And she can't be fired, so she doesn't, in a way, she's her own independent department.
And
then
she's saved us because she's found little ubus here and there, and we're like, oh,
Thank
okay,
you very
void
much.
that, do it again. Okay. So, no, she absolutely keeps watch on us, make
And
sure we
then
do it.
after she is done with it, then it goes to council. And then council has the responsibility of reviewing whatever those warrants are and bringing up questions, and they do that final.
Right.
So those are also
Right. The
somewhat
checks,
additional layers of control.
right. The checks might be printed, but they are not allowed to be mailed until it's been approved by the treasurer. Then we can mail them. So they've asked before, we're running behind, can we just mail them? And I always say, nope. So we're holding them. She sees the checks that are there. She knows they haven't been mailed. And she's got the invoices and everything to look at, so.
There are probably a lot of small businesses that wish they had this level of control.
Oh, yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Any other questions? Thank you, Milana.
Sure.
And we will move on to number 5, which is our transit system. This is 2015-2016 draft audited financial statements. And Milana, you're on stage again.
I got off my feet for a minute.
Do you need a break?
No, I'm good.
You sure?
I'm sure.
Okay.
Sure. We have a draft of the transit audit in front of you tonight. The opinion is much the same as it was in the prior year. The statements are set up in the same way as in the prior year. The footnotes have been set up the same as in the prior year. And we've been through this process. The audit's the audit work has been completed, and we have a draft for this committee to look at, with the intent being that we're able to finalize the transit audit at the next council meeting. I was hoping to get you the citywide draft, didn't quite make that, and I didn't want to push it and then have something go horribly wrong. So we'll just wait until the auditors feel comfortable with that one. But the transit audit piece has been completed. One of the things in the prior year that we had was a deficit in the operating fund because of the GASB 68 requirements with the pension. I'm happy to say that we were able to make it through that initial adjustment, and our net position is back to zero for operations. So, and that is what we have to do with the transit, because it's not wholly funded by RCTC, but a good deal of it is. So we've got that back on the proper footing. We still have some deferred monies that will be spent in the future based on the way that the grants roll on that. Our fare box ratio is right at the combined 10%. It's just a hair over, which is the requirement for the contract. And we seem to have everything in line with the transit department. Their internal controls are in good shape. The internal control findings at the back of this report, I have since gone through with the auditors as far as updating those management responses, because what's there now are basically what was there in the prior year. I also confirmed with them there are no new findings. The only thing we have are findings from the prior year that roll forward. And that's because we issued in March for the transit department, and that still was well after year end. So these findings stay in place, and we'll just update the wording of the management responses as we go forward. So I don't know if you have any specific questions on the audit statements themselves.
Let me ask what the timeline is on this. Is this something that we have to ship off to RTC?
RCTC, yeah, them people, yeah. They have to have it in their hands next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
So
So you're
that's
wanting to take this to council to
on
be
Tuesday
approved
night.
tomorrow?
No, Tuesday night, next week,
Next week?
not tomorrow.
Okay. Next Wednesday. And the only reason why this says draft at this point is because it has not been approved by council?
Because it has not been approved by this committee.
Okay.
Once I get it ready for council for next Tuesday, the idea is that we would have it in its final form. It may still say draft, but it be able to have the draft removed and have it issued immediately following.
Okay.
And I think we all understand that this is old stuff.
The findings, yes.
Uh-huh. And we've discussed how those findings are being addressed and how they're going forward. But we're not going to be able to undo that. It
Correct.
occurred.
Right.
And we're addressing it going forward. And, you know, I've looked at it in quite detail. I'm very happy with it. If others are ready, I'm at the point I'd be happy to make a recommendation that we approve the draft as is and forward it on to the city council.
Okay, so all of the findings in the back, are these pretty much lining up with what we've already started with our audit, you know, the spreadsheet that we've been doing on
Oh, yes.
the
The state controller's
state
report.
controllers? Yes.
It's mostly internal controls. They really boil down to internal controls, which were not in place.
Right.
And we've been working hard at trying to make sure we get everything coordinated and we get everything put in place. We have the new software. We're getting trained. We're getting our manuals up to date, and all of these things come together, but they came together after year end, and they're still coming together now. So we know that 16 has the same findings in those instances as they were in 15. And in 17, we'll still have some of these because we're still trying to get through the last of them. So for fiscal 17, some will still be here, but hopefully with that one, the comments will be, this has been done, handled, and is no longer a problem. Right now, everything is just like a work in progress. We're working towards it. We're working towards it. I want to be able to say this has been resolved.
And I'm sure that the city manager's gone through all of these findings to double check on, have they all been complied with at this point? Great, thank you.
In your experience, this is somewhat common for entities that have had issues in the past and they fix them and go forward.
Correct.
We're not unusual than any other entity that's found themselves in the position we've been in.
Right. When you have these kinds of internal control breakdowns and the massive change in staffing and everything that the city has gone through, the findings are typical. They are. You just have to find a way to overcome them. And we are. It's just taking time to get through them all.
There's no little magic fairy dust to make it disappear.
I wish there was. I haven't found it.
Madam Chairman, did I hear a motion in a second?
No, not yet.
Was that?
I will make an
motion?
official motion
Why don't-
to approve these to pass on to the city council in their present form.
Okay, we have public speaker? Okay, let's open for public comment at 7:20.
Judy Bingham, 115 Minnesota. So my question is, why aren't the auditors here to present this? And two questions for the audit committee, and are the auditors or Ms. Taylor. Question one, how is it possible that the Transit Authority purchased additional buses and increased their routes, but generated $10,000 less revenue than in 2015? Question two, if the SEC regulations requiring the Finance and Audit Committee to approve financial statements doesn't apply to Beaumont, why are these financial statements in front of this committee? There is no direction to the committee. The city council claims that they only receive and file audits. That's what they said at the last council meeting. And they are not responsible for approval. Now Beaumont's Finance and Audit Committee has a transit audit before them, but there is no written direction, and Taylor claims the SEC regulations do not apply. So what is this committee doing approving this?
Thank you for your comments. Any other public speakers? Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have any questions on any of the line items? Overall? Lana, do we currently have a statement that we're receiving on a monthly basis for this department?
For transit, I have not yet.
Okay.
With transit, mostly because they're always at a zero net position, but we can provide that as well. We've changed some of the cash receipting policies so that they're ongoing on a consistent basis. So we wouldn't have to be waiting at month end for anything for that. So that could become one of the reports, one of the different funds
When
that
we
we
make that
present.
decision on what we want to see on those, but we're capable of pulling it.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Can I ask when the last time I noticed there's a PERS defined benefit pension portion in here?
Yes.
When was the last actuarial completed, and has that been factored into?
Yes, and that's part of the GASB 68 requirements, is that all the actuarial numbers be taken into consideration, which is why there's such a large net pension liability as well as the deferred inflow and the deferred outflow. That's all related to future costs that the plan would incur based on staffing and ages of the staff at this time. So all of that is taken into consideration. I believe that the actuarial is, because it goes through PERS,
Right.
I think it's a year behind. Does that sound right? It's a year. Yeah, it's 1 year behind.
You're being generous.
Okay, it's 2 years behind, and yeah, I'm sure that what they give to us is older than that, but we
Sure.
go from the report they give us that's 1 year out, so.
Okay, so that would, but you did have something recent through
Yes.
GASB. Okay.
Yes.
I just was double checking that because some of
Yes.
the,
They did not particularly like the GASB 68 requirements that made them do that.
I'm sure, 'cause they
and
probably had
the-
to triple in size.
The
'cause
first
they're-
one was a little tough, but now we've gotten past that first cycle, and it seems to be leveling out a little bit, so.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anything.
Minor, on page 28, and this may be a question for Elizabeth, or it might be for you, Milan. I'll let you two fight it out. The management response on the passes, we've gone beyond that, correct? Aren't we? And so maybe the rest of the committee should hear about the progress beyond this statement.
Right. I had started redrafting, little changes for that. Let me find it. Segregation. Okay. So this is what I currently have drafted as the management response for the bus passes. While the transit management oversees ongoing service and compliance aspects of the Beaumont transit system, the City of Beaumont management had ultimate control over the transit system, financial reporting, and other broader-based management oversight. Bus passes are sold to the public outside of the transit department staff. The internal control for issuance of bus passes has been reviewed, and a formal procedure is in place to safeguard and track the various bus passes that are purchased and sold. A tracking process was started in July 2017 and is monitored outside of the finance office by the transit management analyst. So
And
that
that's
is
what we'll see on the next.
final.
Yeah, because this one cannot be changed.
This one can. We can still
can
make
update it?
slight changes in the management response based on facts and circumstances that have changed since the last time. What they've got will not change. but
Right.
The management
But your
response
response
can
can.
be edited,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other management responses that will be changed?
Let's see. I don't think it was very much. I think that one was the most. They all start with the same sentence, that I know. On the first one, the city is currently involved in the fixed asset inventory and valuation process. So the last sentence now says 26.
Which page?
26?
26. Okay. Got
Thank
it.
you. You're ahead of me. Go ahead.
Okay, so the
This
last
is capital
little bit
assets.
where it says the city is currently working towards a contract through, we got past that. So I have now that the city is currently involved in a fixed asset inventory and valuation process.
Yeah, good.
Okay,
Excellent.
So I did
Okay.
that one. What else did I do?
Now, the other one that I think is the accrued vacation, is that more up to date now too than where this was?
We are working on our upgrade to our new payroll processing program.
Okay.
It's with the same paychecks, but it's a different version. It's a higher version with a lot more capability, so we can track things a lot better. What we're working on now is making sure that that software upgrade is correct and that those caps can be properly processed. So that one's still in process because we're still in
Okay.
that conversion.
We hadn't
That-
gotten-
We're
okay.
so close to the end of that conversion that
Okay.
I'm thinking next month, we have the new time clocks and all of that. I think we'll have that under control next month.
Okay. And we've already gone through discussing the policy and procedures, having that deadline by the end of the year.
Right,
So we're good there.
So it's just those
And then
two
we're-
little tweaks.
We're still working on the fixed asset.
Right, we're not in the RFP process anymore, but we're
But we're-
in.
We're in the process of doing the audit and getting all the access.
They've done all the tagging, they've done the street assessment now. I'm just waiting for my final report with all the valuations on it so I can start getting that geared up and then update it for things that have happened since they did the inventory and get it all recorded. So
Perfect.
we're right at the edge of that too.
Okay. Any other questions?
And RCTC is going to be taking back the audit of the Transit Authority, and it will no longer be a function of the finance office here to obtain an auditor to issue this report separately. RCTC is taking this back.
They're going to audit it.
Yes.
Wonderful.
That'll be great.
It's based on that. It's awesome. It is
is
awesome.
awesome.
It'll be their auditors, it'll be their tests, it'll be their report,
Excellent.
and it'll be their bill.
Yeah.
Let's just
Be
say,
all on them.
yep.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? You want to make your motion?
Yeah, then I move that we accept the draft with the changes that have been read to us for passing on to the city council for approval.
May I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, and then we have individual financial reports for July 2017. I think this is the reports that we talked about previously, right? And now you've got some actual numbers? Okay, great.
Not the one report I want still, but I'm working on that one.
Okay,
There's some glitches. So what I have is 6 reports, all for the month of July, for us to look at. This is right out of the system, printed everything on Friday so that we would have it. The first report, which is this guy, this is all of the checks and withdrawals and deposits out of our pooled cash account, which could stretch across all the funds. Depends on which funds hold pooled cash, but this is not just the general fund. This will be all the funds, including some restricted funds. But this is just the banking activity we've recorded. So every line item is here. We are reconciled. This account is reconciled through July 31st. So these are good numbers. The transactions are here. And I didn't know if you had any specific questions, if you'd even had a chance to look at it, but I thought I could point out a few things so that you could see how the system works. If you go to page 3 of 22, down at the bottom, it has that little bitty page. There is a line item that says exclusive risk management authority, and it's a check for $570,000.
where are you? I'm sorry, I'm lost.
They're out of order. It's the back one.
Out of order. Yeah.
Page up to,
Oh, and they're sideways on the screen too. That does not help. Okay, so at the top it says cash continued, and it's page 3 of
Oh, I see where you're talking.
20, what?
Yeah.
3 of 22. But it says cash continued at the very top.
123, okay.
So, but the little, it's in the corners there.
Yeah,
So
they're
what
real
page
light
again?
too.
Now that we've
Page-
caught up?
Page 3.
Thank you.
111 and 130
Yep.
on our printout.
What is it?
I know it's hard to see.
Got it.
So there's a line item, you can kind of see where I have pink here, but it's the insurance premium that we pay for $570,000. Okay. What happened is we issued a check and then it got lost in the mail. Always a good time. So if you go to page 5, so 2 pages in, you will see the same amount at the top,
you found it.
but in the debit column, because we had to void it. So we saw it there because we printed it, we've reversed it, it's right here. And because we needed to make sure we did this right, on page 7, you'll see it again, but this time we took no chances and we wired the funds. That is an EFT transaction. So that's kind of how this all looks. That gives you a debit and a credit and another credit, and so you see all that kind of activity. But that would be the case for any payment we make. If it gets lost or needs to be voided, you're still going to see it in this activity report, every single check and deposit.
Who paid the fees?
Well,
No, that's good.
you know, we do have bank analysis, and so, you know, they waive that part. So there's all kinds of transactions. You'll notice that there are a ton of cash receipt entries, just a ton. And some are teensy-weensy and some are humongous. And that's because we have so many different cashiers. And we have this set so that we can go back to any particular cashier, any particular day, any particular transaction that they have. Because behind this, we actually have the documents that support everything they did for that day, including their cash drawer count out at the end of the day. We have all of that documentation at our fingertips as this comes through. So it makes it lengthy, but it's all there.
I think for me, I would need to go back through my notes on previous meetings to see what reports we were favoring.
The one that everyone wanted, including me, is the one that won't work still, so getting there.
The one we were hoping we would have.
We were hoping
yeah.
would be working, and it's not yet. But
Okay.
this, I thought, would be good for this meeting because you can see every banking transaction in our pooled general account, everything. If it goes through that pooled bank account, it's in this report.
I know I've been wanting to see this, so I was real happy.
Oh, good. Good, good. And I can show you how to run this.
Because I've been looking to see where I could find it
Just see the bank, just the bank activity. Yes.
in
So,
the report section, yeah.
I'm trying to remember if we wanted to see something like that on a quarterly basis, but not on the monthly. Do you remember?
I could do that too. I mean, at any,
Because I think we were talking about it being
a lot of detail.
a lot of detail. It was
has to be
too
in a
much
quarter,
for us to
yeah.
take a look
Yeah.
at. But to look at it on a quarterly,
Okay.
and then there were specific reports that we wanted to see monthly.
Nobody's dead.
And then we knew we wanted to review the report that was being given to council.
Right. And those are here. That's the other
Well,
ones.
But Sharon likes
I think
this
the good
report.
thing about this report is that you can see everything that went into
Right.
cash and came out of cash at a glance. I know you think, you know, it seems lengthy, but a quarterly report's going to be,
Yeah, for you, I think this report's fantastic.
And-
Because that gives you a way to go down and make sure that everything's going in and going out the way it's supposed to, correct?
well, I mean, not in my opinion, but
Just in general. In general, this is the general account where most of the banking activity occurs. We have some other bank accounts, yes, but they're not. This is where all of the meat and potatoes are in this account. So this one is going to tell you a lot more than, say, the gas tax fund, which has one deposit a month. You know, that's,
yeah.
I'd be inclined to say the quarterly is going to be too big, too much. The monthly, it's fresher in your mind what for it, maybe for the treasurer, what she saw that was written and approved, et cetera. So maybe for the time being, the monthly is really good because not only does it satisfy the needs of the treasurer, but then also we don't end up with too big a report with too much detail in it that we don't really,
Yeah, because you'd be looking at 3 times what we've got sitting here
yes,
to go through.
yes.
plus, as we all get comfortable with the system and the cycles, it might be easier for this committee to look at the activity this way until there's a comfort where it's like, okay, then, you know, this has been the same, we've seen this cycle, let's do something different. We could do that too.
And I think this was initially requested by you, Sharon, wasn't
I
it?
think so.
Yeah. So she's the super user.
She's the
Super
super
user.
user.
It's easy to glance through.
Yes.
I do really like seeing that variance percentage, though, at the end of the column. I
in the,
really like that.
And these little guys over here,
Yeah.
my other little reports. I do too. I just wish, because of time and what I was trying to accomplish on Friday, which was too many things at once. I wanted to take some of the columns out, but I didn't get a chance to. So I was hoping to simplify it, but ran out of time. So I thought it's better to have everything than to have nothing. So
I would think that this detail is something that we probably won't look at on an ongoing basis, but if there's some issue comes up, somebody says, why is the city spending so much money on whatever, Coca-Cola?
Or
that
why are
might
we
be something that
600%
want-
over?
yeah,
Right.
something that we want to request a few days before the meeting.
Right.
To have that detail printed out. But I think until we become familiar with it, it's nice to have. But I'm not sure that it'll be useful on an ongoing, all-the-time basis
In the future.
in the future, after we become familiar with what's
Okay.
available.
right.
But the variance is wonderful.
The
Just
income
tickles my
statement.
little heart.
So that takes me to the second report, which will also go to council, but again, by the time I give it to council, I swear it will not have all these columns. I will clean it up. But yours has the individual line items with the categories. Council just gets the categories. Theirs is a little shorter. It's an abridged edition, if you will. But this has, the first one I did, the number 2 report, is just the general fund. So everything we saw in that pooled cash account, this is only going to be the transactions that relate to the general fund, which is the operating portion of the city. So I went through and I was reviewing the variances and some of the activity against the budget and trying to get a feel for what we have to look at. And I'll tell you, the revenues are difficult to review on a 1-month basis because we're currently working on the accruals for June. When we do that, then we're going to be reversing stuff out of July because we moved it back, and all these numbers are going to change because some of this money that we currently have as July is really for June, and we're going to have to move it back. So the revenues are hard to review. So looking at last year to this year, which is report number 4, has some of the same issues until we get all those accruals accounted for. It'll look like we got a lot less money in one category in the prior year and we got a ton of it this year. Well, it's because that hasn't been shifted yet. So the revenues are much harder to review on a 1-month basis at this point in time. So I really focused my efforts on the expenses. Things that do happen or occur on more month-to-month kind of basis where there's a little bit more regular activity, if you will, because the revenues bounce around. But what I did was I said, okay, if we were to have spent 1/12, 1 month, what would our remaining percentage be? Well, it should be 91.67%. So I just scrolled down and took a look at the expenses to see, okay, which line items do we have possibly concern with? And then I created the grid that's on your staff report. There are some that are close. They're below, but they're close. It's just something we need to look at. Maybe we didn't budget things quite the way we needed to, or it's off a little bit. And then there's some that are a lot more different, and do I have a reason for that? And I tried to provide those in this grid as well. And then I have a few that I got to go back and figure out, well, why is that so far off? And do I need to move something?
Right.
Did we totally skip it? There are a few things to note. When you do look at the budget to actual, say, page 3 of 20. Looks like this guy. Every department's going to have this same issue, which is that there is no budget for other compensation, for holiday, or for vacation. Because to budget how people are going to take their time off is difficult. So we budget in total. What will the salaries be? But then when we actually process it, we do track to see how much of that fell into holiday time, how much was vacation time, how much was sick time. So there's going to be a lot of 0% with negative or unfavorable variances within personnel in every department. And that's because the budget is done as one line item, but all of our individual expenses
Are all
then
broke
done.
out. Okay.
So if you look at the total, you can see a pretty good idea of, did our total personnel cost for that department land where it should have for that month?
I have a question on
Yes,
that,
ma'am.
Milana.
Yes.
All the salaries and compensation in this report seem high. The percentage is the other way.
Percentage is what's left, not how much did they spend.
Because it seems like the salaries for that month, all of them are not in there. Are they all in there?
They're in
The
there.
month of July?
Yes. And again, July's going to look a little bit weird because of the accrual for June. One of the, I guess it's a bonus, is that our period ending was June the 29th, I think. So it was paid in July, but because it was June 29th, we just booked it June 29th because we were going to have to anyway. So July looks like we didn't have as much expense because it's really only got one pay period in it when it normally will have two.
That's why.
Right. So it's July is always going to be the weird month, no matter what, because of the accruals.
Is 6016, is that term benefits? Pick any.
The accrued time cash out.
Correct.
That is if in public safety, if they have holiday bank, which no other department has, but they do. If they have holiday time that they want to cash out, based on the MOU and the different criteria, that cash out can be done and would be recorded in that account. Same with if someone wanted to cash out vacation time, because there's I believe you can do that twice a year based on the contracts, then it would be recorded there as well. Bless you.
Is there a separate set aside for term benefits?
For term benefits?
Yeah.
We don't have term benefits. We have, we don't have any OPEB. There's no OPEB benefits here at all. It's only the PERS. Anything else has to be paid for by the employee,
Okay.
which is
I also
awesome.
have a question, Milana, about under miscellaneous revenues.
Oh, yes, I do too. I found a payment in there that I don't think belongs. Indeed. I believe that the deposit that got posted there is for $541,000, and I am working on getting the documentation so I can get that put in the right account.
Okay.
It is not miscellaneous.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Slipped
that does
through
not
the
belong
cracks.
there.
Let's see if I had any other ones.
Well, I think that's a good point, though, on the reason for looking at the report.
Yes.
You know, being able to spot these.
Real weird stuff.
Real-
Miscellaneous
yeah.
income should not have $500,000 in it for 1 month. That seems a little unusual. But yes, I found the entry, and while the entry in the general ledger is pretty specific, which would tell me where to put it, I'm looking for that original document so that I'm sure that that's really where it needs to go, and then that'll get moved out. It has to do with developer fees. It doesn't go there at all. So.
Okay.
I was kind of confused too. Somewhere here, I'm trying to find it. The plan check fees, there's always a lot of plan check fees.
Yes.
But when I looked at that account, it's zero.
In the revenues is zero.
When-
We're working on making sure we get those in the right place, because it seems to me that we're picking them up in one place and not another. And so we're going back on that. There's
Yeah.
a big amount in Public Works engineering revenues, and I know that there should be more there. So I'm trying to make sure that it didn't end up in a different bucket, but that's where most of it should be. And then there should be some in the building and safety permits, but not as much. So we're trying to make
Yeah.
sure we got it captured right. One of the software implementations is on the planning and public works side, where they actually get the invoicing done and get it segregated right. And what we're finding is that when it's transferring over into the module for us to approve into the general ledger, we're finding that sometimes they're not going in the right place. So we're working on sitting with one of the permit clerks to see exactly how they're inputting into that side so that we can better understand what's being spit out, because it doesn't look like it's all landing correctly. And it's also generating some really weird $1 fees. We don't know why. So we've got a few issues and bugs to work out on that
I forgot
side.
you were doing that whole separate
Yeah.
module.
Yeah.
But under expenses for public works, so on page 9 of 20,
Uh-huh.
if you look under plan check fees, is zero. That, so,
That means that at July 31st, we hadn't paid a plan checker to do that work yet. So either there wasn't any done that month, which I doubt.
which is kind of.
My guess is that those are those, that big old stack that those are mostly plan checks, and they are so slow in sending us those invoices. That's probably why it's zero. We may have done them recently for July.
Okay.
So, yes, one of the vendors we use for that is NV5, and we end up with a stack. It's probably like this when they finally send
really
all the
big.
documentation to make those payments on the plan check. So that is a big one, and I just don't think it had happened in July yet.
Is that the ones that we subcontract out?
Yes,
Or- yeah.
for plan checks. Mhm.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Under administration, which is on page 7 of 20,
Yes.
administrative overhead, is that, is the
What?
other agencies?
It has to do with the other enterprise funds and the other funds that should share in the cost of administrative overhead. What I usually have done is waited until the quarter is over and then be able to do an assessment, and then based on that, do that entry on a quarterly basis. It's a little easier to look at 3 months of activity and figure out how to allocate it than to try and do it
Well,
month to
it's probably
month.
not real important to do it monthly.
Yeah, so it's just a calculated
Right,
allocation.
right.
Yeah.
And with transit, theirs is an actual budgeted figure through RCTC, approved by RCTC, so I have a pretty good idea what theirs is going to be anyway, but I do have to go through the calculation to make sure that it's a reasonable allocation of overhead costs. We don't want to just book it because they budgeted for it, so it takes a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and things like refuse.
Yes.
Refuse collection, residential,
Mm-hmm.
is zero, but that's because.
That's the billing cycle for refuse. The bills for June were booked for June, so there's no cycle in July because it's every other month. And so there'll be August, there will be a new cycle in August, so you'll see big numbers hit in August. We have a little number right now in refuse revenue. That is for the commercial contract, and that has a calculation that goes with it, and I believe that dollar amount is actually going to get pulled back into last year, because I believe that's the the June payment we got in July. So refuse contract is a little bit different, and when we have good numbers to report, then we can talk about how those numbers come to be and what they actually represent.
Okay.
I think that was it for my.
Okay. And then we have the same report, sort of, it looks the same, but for the wastewater funds. There are 3 funds that make up the wastewater enterprise.
Can you just explain, there's what, 3 different fund,
Oh, the 3 wastewater funds? Yes.
705?
Right. 700 is wastewater operations, just the operations of the facility itself, ongoing day-to-day, and some maintenance costs. 705 is the fund that is for development impact fees that are assessed based on new developments coming in and the impact it'll have on the sewer system. So we have those fees that get collected there. The third fund is 710, and that's where we are capturing capital assets. So if there's grant funds coming in to cover the cost of a capital asset that's going to be constructed or purchased, it'll be recorded in 710. Any costs that are incurred that would represent a capital asset will also be captured in 710 in order to segregate all of the capital assets and the depreciation into one place and not be commingled with operations, which can sometimes skew the picture. When it comes to the end, it all gets put together anyway, but for our purpose, looking at them independently is sometimes more helpful.
Any other questions? I'm going to make a suggestion that maybe we, for next month's meeting, that maybe we take a chance to go through this and look at it. I'd like to go back through my previous notes on the other reports, and then maybe we might have the report that we were hoping for tonight, or?
I hope so.
Okay, we'll move that over for next month too.
Yes, and next
then
month.
let's make some decisions on the actual reports that we want to get on a monthly basis.
Right, because at the next meeting, I will have August. So as we move forward, then you'd get the next month each time.
Okay. Any other questions? Do we have public comment? Okay.
So you're moving the approval of reports to the next meeting so that we can approve them all at once after review. Is that correct? Or that's what you're thinking?
Are any of these going to council for their review and approval?
They are in the abridged version, which will just be at a higher summary level. I
Do we
intended
have a
to,
copy of what's going to them?
what you have in front of you, but just all the little subtotals instead of each individual line. And then I'll be removing some of the columns because it's just too much
detail will
information.
Volume and detail.
Right. The volume of detail will be much less for council.
There's one that says 1 of 4, 2 of 4, there's only 4 pages.
Oh, the last one?
So which
The account
report is
summary,
it?
that the one?
The last one is the fund transfer detail report.
So she'll eliminate the volume of the detail in
Right.
between.
Right.
And then she'll do the totals, if I understood that correctly.
Right, all the subtotals. So what'll be there is,
What are you thinking?
it'll be
No.
What's bold?
taxes.
Which one is it in here?
Basically, what's bold?
Right. So taxes,
We've got
then
several
licenses, then permits, and it'll just be
I
that
see.
way.
Yep.
And then I'll take out some of the columns because the original budget and the current budget are the same at this point. So I'd remove one of the two of them so they don't have to see it. And the period activity and the fiscal activity, again, are the same because it's 1 month. I can remove one of those. Just to try and clean it up and make it a little easier to read for council. Otherwise, you end up with a huge grid.
It's like here, she's going to,
Oh, that,
making sure.
Summary
On
thingy
page
at the
like
back?
1 of 20, for example, you're going to eliminate
The individual line
the
items.
individual
Right.
line items and
it'll just say taxes. Category 40, taxes. Category 41, licenses. Those subtotals.
Do you have concerns or thoughts?
No, it's just, I haven't had time to actually go through the report.
Right, and
so-
taking a look at all of the different,
Yeah, and I don't know, just me, I'd like to actually see what it is that's going over to council, you know?
oh, sure.
That would help me, so that I know what they're going to see is, we didn't see any errors on that or any
Right.
differences in the reporting numbers.
Right, in July, just because of timing, yes, July will, as we go along, could be different because we're doing the accruals as we go. So that also is a concern, trying to do these within a timely fashion right after year end is always tricky because it is going to change. It's fluid until we get all of the accruals booked.
So is there a need for these reports to go to council in the next council meeting?
I wanted to. I believe council should have the opportunity to see them. We can mark them draft or preliminary,
Okay.
but I think council should have access to that
And
information.
just see if they would want to see them, or
Oh, the
that they would
reports?
have it as backup to the report that they requested.
That's the report that we've talked about that they would get from me on a monthly basis at their second meeting each month, is that summary budget to actual activity of the general fund and the sewer fund, and then anything extra that they would ask for at that time. So I could
maybe-
mark it as preliminary while we're working on the accrual still.
And then they might have input that would come back to us,
Right.
and then at the next meeting,
then we'd
we
have a
can
final.
add the other report and et cetera.
Right.
And then present that
Right,
afterwards
or
to
continue to
council as
refine
well.
it, so when we have June finalized, then we re-present July, maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What do you think,
I would,
Mike? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of just having council have the opportunity to review draft statements. Maybe with the caveat, or you let them know that Finance Committee is still reviewing some of the statements or the reports, just to make sure they have a consensus on that for input. And then maybe final reports will be forthcoming as soon as Finance Committee is
Done, and we've gotten all the
That's their
accruals
second-
Yeah,
their
straightened
second
up and,
meeting in the
okay.
a
month,
lot of
right?
data to.
Right.
Milana,
digest.
it's the second meeting of the month.
Yes, so
So
it'll be
if
their
we were
next
looking
meeting.
at ours being our one meeting a month, so we would be looking at the very beginning of the month, then you would bring it back.
Well, that sounds right.
Well, I was going to do the first of the month with the Finance Committee to have the opportunity to look at it and then present it to council at their second meeting that month. So it would be the same thing that month. But it would give some
So
time.
this month, you would present it to council at the second meeting that
The
says
19th.
draft, and say that we're still
committee-
reviewing it, and there's another report we still have to see, et cetera.
Right, and that the
Council would
accruals
get
are being worked out
Their
and,
opportunity to give input.
Right.
And then the next Finance and Audit Committee meeting, we'd have the additional report, and
And
then.
finalize it.
we'd
and
be able to
finalize July
finalize it
and have the
With
August
the
report.
input from council. Sounds good.
It's hard to get it rolling, but once we
Yeah.
get rolling, it'll be a lot
Yeah.
better.
Does sound good. That keeps everybody with their opportunity for input.
Right.
Right.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay. So I make a motion that we accept this as work in progress, and then we put it on the agenda for the next Finance and Audit Committee meeting with, at that time, also input from council.
Okay. And then we'll do a final.
And we'll add the other report to it.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to future agenda items.
I think we should put on the next agenda to look at the reports.
That would be a good thing, right? Report review.
What else did we say?
Let me look back through my notes here.
And we'll have the next piece of the policy, and I'll update
Okay.
What was that, Milana?
the finance policy, the finance department policies. I'll bring you the changes
The updates?
and then another section.
Okay.
I have a question about future agenda items. And that is that we do need to get back to the state controller's checklist at some point in time. So,
I actually had that on as a footnote on because of the comments on the audited one. And I know that we've been waiting for the system, the software to get in place so that we had a lot of these procedures and holes. So I think that's really important that we do get back on that and start filling in the rest of that, that report.
but you do also have audits to wrap up.
Right. I'm
et
hoping
cetera,
at the next
so-
meeting, we have the citywide audit report.
Okay, so that,
So,
so potential agenda item for the next one. So maybe like in November, we could revisit state controller?
And by
Yeah.
then, I'll be through a couple of the policy pieces that'll also help fill in that checklist. It all goes together. It all has to come together to make it work.
Okay.
okay, so we'll table
So
for November.
she's hoping for the audit report at the next meeting, the draft of the audit report. And then we can just keep a note that in November, we're hoping to go back to the state controller's
Right.
checklist.
Well, you could always put it on the agenda, and we can just talk about, the progress and when we're going to readdress
Okay.
it. Mhm.
Okay. Okay, I'm good on that. Anything else? Nope. Okay. Okay, so recap of our meeting for the Treasurer's Monthly Finance and Audit Committee report for council.
You want me to read my notes? Okay.
Yeah, just see if we want to add anything to it.
I will just go through the Finance Department policies that Luana presented. Let's see. Do you want me to talk about the purpose and creation of the committee that you added audit to the Finance Committee in the beginning?
Can't hear her.
Not change
Okay.
the ordinance.
We need you to move your mic closer.
Oh. Would you like for me to put in the discussion about that the Finance and Audit Committee has not changed since it was,
Since its inception,
yeah, and the ordinance, and no other changes?
I think a
have-
brief recap of the discussion that we had on the SEC compliance would be good.
And so some of the discussion on the Finance Department policies. I have a note here that, well, that we approved the transit system audit. And that
Right,
we
recommendation for approval.
recommendation for approval. And that we also would like to see a monthly RCTC statement.
I think that's good.
And that RCTC is taking us back to do the audit. I think that's probably
That's
worth
nice. That's a
mentioning.
good announcement.
And
And then I think just to tie it up would be that we reviewed the various, reports.
yeah,
Number 6,
and that the
and then that
draft
process of
reports, yeah.
sending it over to council.
Yeah, and so I have a note on that.
No.
And then future agenda.
Good? We good? Okay. That sounds good to me. Anything else? Okay, let's adjourn our meeting at 8:06. And I'll see everybody on October 2nd. Thank you.